The Provisional Irish Republican Army, often called the Provisional IRA or the Provos, was one of the central armed organizations of the conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles. It described itself as the army of an Irish republic that, in its view, had never legitimately ceased to exist. Its stated goals were to end British rule in Northern Ireland, reunify Ireland, and create an independent socialist republic across the island. To the British government, it was a terrorist organization. To the Republic of Ireland, it was unlawful. To its supporters, it claimed continuity with earlier generations of Irish republican struggle. Understanding the Provisional IRA means looking not only at its violence, but also at the political breakdown, communal fear, and historical claims that allowed it to grow. The roots of the Provisional IRA lie in a much older argument over sovereignty and identity. After the Irish War of Independence and the partition of Ireland, Northern Ireland remained within the United Kingdom, with a Protestant Unionist majority and a large Catholic nationalist minority. Many nationalists saw partition as unjust and believed Irish self-determination had been left unfinished. Unionists, meanwhile, saw Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom as legitimate and essential to their political and cultural identity. By the 1960s, Catholic communities in Northern Ireland were also protesting discrimination in housing, voting, employment, and policing. What began as a civil rights movement soon collided with deep fears on both sides of the constitutional divide. The immediate crisis came in 1968 and 1969, when nonviolent civil rights demonstrations were met with hostility from loyalist groups and harsh responses from the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the police force known as the RUC. Tensions escalated into riots, especially in August 1969, when Catholic districts faced attacks and street fighting spread. British soldiers were deployed, at first welcomed by some Catholics as protection from loyalist violence and local policing they distrusted. But the sense that Catholic areas had been left vulnerable became a defining memory. Within the Republican movement, many believed the existing IRA had failed to defend nationalist neighborhoods. That belief became a powerful reason for a split. In December 1969, the Republican movement divided. One faction became known as the official IRA, while the breakaway group became the Provisional IRA. At first, the Provisionals were the smaller faction, but their emphasis on defending Catholic communities gave them growing support in places that felt under siege. Their name came from a claim about legitimacy. They argued they represented a provisional army council continuing the authority of the Irish Republic proclaimed in earlier revolutionary periods. This was not just branding. It shaped how the organization justified rejecting both the British state and the government of the Republic of Ireland. In its own worldview, it did not answer to either government because it claimed to serve a higher Republican mandate. The Provisional IRA's early role was heavily tied to local defense. In many Catholic districts, especially in Belfast and Derry, barricades, patrols, and armed defense groups developed amid fear of loyalist attacks and distrust of the RUC. But this defensive posture changed quickly. By 1970, the organization began moving toward an offensive campaign against the British Army and the RUC. This shift reflected both ideology and strategy. The IRA believed British authority in Northern Ireland could be made politically and militarily unsustainable. It also believed that armed struggle could force the issue of Irish reunification onto the international stage. What began as community defense increasingly became a sustained guerrilla and bombing campaign. The IRA used a mixture of urban guerrilla tactics, rural ambushes, sniper attacks, and bombings. Its targets included British soldiers, police officers, military facilities, political institutions, economic infrastructure, and businesses seen as supporting the state. It also targeted civilian contractors working with British security forces. Bombings became one of its most visible methods, not only in Northern Ireland but also in England, where attacks were intended to pressure the British public and government directly. These tactics made the organization highly active and difficult to suppress, but they also caused widespread fear and civilian death. The IRA's campaign killed more than 1,700 people, including roughly 1,000 members of the British security forces and hundreds of civilians. The human cost of the campaign was immense. In Republican narratives, IRA volunteers were fighting an occupying force and responding to state violence, internment, raids, and discrimination. In Unionist and British narratives, the IRA was a terrorist organization that murdered police, soldiers, civilians, and political opponents while trying to bomb Northern Ireland out of the United Kingdom. Both perspectives were shaped by real experiences of loss. Families buried people killed at checkpoints, in pubs, on streets, in workplaces, and in homes. The violence hardened identities and made compromise more difficult. Each attack could provoke retaliation, deepen segregation, and reinforce the belief that only force could protect one's community. The Provisional IRA did not operate in isolation. It received support from parts of the Irish diaspora, especially in the Anglosphere, where fundraising and political sympathy helped sustain Republican networks. It also received outside assistance from sources including the Palestine Liberation Organization and Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Libyan-supplied weapons later became especially significant, increasing the IRA's capacity during parts of the conflict. These links mattered because an underground organization depended on money, weapons, safe houses, intelligence, and sympathetic communities. At the same time, international support was never uniform. Many Irish people abroad supported civil rights or Irish unity but opposed IRA violence, especially as civilian casualties mounted. By the 1970s, the Provisional IRA had become the dominant Republican paramilitary faction, eclipsing the official IRA. But dominance did not mean unity across Irish republicanism. Arguments continued over strategy, politics, and legitimacy. Sinn Féin, widely described as the IRA's political wing, became increasingly important as Republicans debated whether armed struggle alone could achieve their goals. Over time, a dual strategy developed: military pressure combined with political organization. This evolution did not happen overnight. It was shaped by prison protests, community activism, electoral campaigns, British security policy, and the realization that neither the IRA nor the British state could easily defeat the other outright. The path toward peace was long and fragile. Ceasefires in the 1990s reflected changing calculations within republicanism, unionism, the British government, the Irish government, and wider society. In July 1997, the Provisional IRA declared what became its final ceasefire. This opened the way for Sinn Féin to enter multi-party talks on Northern Ireland's future. The negotiations were difficult because they had to address constitutional status, policing, prisoner releases, weapons, power sharing, and the principle of consent. The result was the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, a landmark settlement that created a new political framework while allowing people in Northern Ireland to identify as British, Irish, or both. The Good Friday Agreement did not erase the past, and it did not instantly settle every dispute. One of the most sensitive questions was decommissioning. What would happen to IRA weapons? For Unionists, armed groups could not remain in the background of democratic politics. For Republicans, surrendering weapons looked like defeat and risked splitting the movement. The issue dragged on for years. In 2005, the IRA formally announced the end of its armed campaign and decommissioned its weapons under supervision by the Independent International Commission on Decommissioning. This marked a decisive symbolic and practical shift from armed struggle toward exclusively political methods by the mainstream Republican movement. Not all Republicans accepted the peace process. Splinter groups emerged, including the Continuity IRA and the Real IRA, rejecting the compromises made by Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA leadership. Some dissident Republican groups have remained active, though they have not matched the scale or influence the Provisional IRA once held. The legacy of the Provos remains deeply contested. For some, they were part of a struggle against British rule and discrimination. For others, they were responsible for unjustifiable violence and lasting trauma. Historically, the Provisional IRA can only be understood within the pressure cooker of Northern Ireland's divided society, where political failure, communal fear, and armed ideology combined to produce one of the most consequential paramilitary campaigns in modern European history. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.